Hey everyone, today I'm going to be showing you how to create variations on the basic 2-5-1 chord progression. Now 2-5-1s and also 4-5-1s, which are very closely related, are incredibly common in all kinds of music, and if you can learn how to mix them up, substitute them, enrich them and vary them, then that's a really useful skill to have, whether you're improvising or writing your own songs or just plain kind of messing about on the piano. Just before I get started, I should say that today's tutorial is sponsored by distrokid.com. Now if you're making and recording your own music, and I know quite a few of you guys who are regulars on the channel do that, then DistroKid offers you a quick, easy and very cost-effective way of getting your songs into all the major online stores and streaming services, and that includes Apple Music, iTunes, Spotify, Amazon and Google Play. Now the deal with DistroKid is simple. You pay just under $20 a year to upload unlimited songs and albums, and you get to keep 100% of your royalty earnings. Now some pretty big names like Ludacris and Megan Davis are already using DistroKid, and as I say, if you're recording your own music, you can do the same as them. It's one of the easiest and most cost-effective ways of getting your music into those big name stores. Now if you want to sign up to DistroKid or find out more, just click the link in the description text right underneath this video. Okay, let's get on with the show and look at some cool 2-5-1s. Okay, let's kick off by reminding ourselves what 2-5-1 progressions are and how we can spot them. First of all, let's explain the numbers. What does the 2-5-1 actually mean? Now, as you may know, any major key, like C major, there's the C major scale, has 7 naturally occurring chords, the so-called diatonic chords, and we find those chords by building triads off the scale of the key. Okay, so in C major we have the diatonic chords of C, D minor, E minor, F, G, A minor and B diminished, before we get back to C at the top of the scale there. Okay, so those are the C major diatonic chords. But to make it easy to discuss things outside of the context of key, we can also give those chords numbers, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And when you see them written down, it's often in Roman numerals, with lowercase numerals for minor chords, okay, and uppercase for major chords. So the 2 chord of C major is the chord built off the 2nd degree of the C major scale, D minor. The 5 chord is built off the 5th, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, G, and the number 1 chord is built off the 1st note of the scale, the tonic, C. So 2, 5, 1. Now I'm playing each chord in its root position there, but actually you would usually play them in inversions that lock together more logically, like this. D minor, G, C. 2, 5, 1. Okay, so exactly the same chords as 2, 5, 1, but just played in a different inversion to give them a more natural flow. 2, 5, 1. D minor, G, C. Now 2-5-1 sequences usually exist within a larger chord progression, often at the midpoint of a progression and then again towards its end. That's because 2-5-1s offer a very handy way of getting back to the tonic chord of a key, the number 1 chord. So the number 2 chord, D minor in the key of C, leads naturally to the number 5 chord, that's one of its harmonic functions, to use the technical language, and the number 5 chord, the so-called dominant chord, leads back naturally to the number 1 chord, the tonic chord. Lots of popular music uses 2-5-1s and 4-5-1s, which are very, very similar. A 4-5-1 is just like a 2-5-1, but instead of using the chord built off the 2nd degree of the scale, it uses the number 4 chord. So in C major that would be F, G, C, 4, 5, 1, rather than 2, 5, 1. As you can probably see, the F chord, the number 4 chord, and the D minor chord, the number 2 chord, are very similar. They sound very similar, they share 2 notes, and in a chord progression, they will often have the same harmonic function. They'll do the same job when it comes to sticking the progression together. They just have slightly different sounds, slightly different colours to them, okay? But a 2-5-1 and a 4-5-1 are pretty much interchangeable. You'll also find 2-5-1s and 4-5-1s in classical music a lot of the time. Yeah, the other night I was at a really good performance of Mozart's opera Don Giovanni, and towards the end of that there's a whole sequence of 4-5-1s. Yeah, it's just before Don Giovanni, the hero, the anti-hero, is about to be dragged off down to hell, and he's singing this song about wine and women, which he calls the sustenance and glory of humanity, and he's in the key of B flat, and you get this whole sequence of okay, 2-5-1. Okay, but just notice what he's doing there. There's a little variation because we've got the chord of E flat, the number 4 chord. Then for the 5 chord, we've got F sus 4, okay, with that B flat held in it, resolving to the B flat. Okay, 4-5-1. Okay, it gives it a kind of churchy, kind of choir boy sound, which is kind of ironic, and probably deliberately so, knowing Mozart, considering the subject matter. So when it comes to spotting 2-5-1 sequences or 4-5-1 sequences, remember that the most likely place to find them is going to be in the middle of a progression or towards the end, just as we're heading back towards the tonic chord, the number 1 chord. So what we're going to do now is look at how you can extend and enrich your 2-5-1s, make them sound cooler, yeah? And we'll start off with some pretty straightforward techniques and to then move on to some approaches that are a bit more technical and a bit more professional sounding. So the very first thing you can do with the 2-5-1 is extend its chords to create a richer and more interesting sound. Let's say that we're in the key of F major. There's the scale of F major. Our 2-5-1 in that key is going to be G minor, C, F. Now right away we can make that sound just a little bit kind of richer by extending either or both of the 2 and 5 chords, yeah? And to start with, we're just going to do that by adding sevenths to them. So G minor can become G minor 7th, yeah? I'm just going to take the F and put it down the bottom instead to kind of retain the shape of the original chord. Our basic C chord can become C7 by adding a B flat, perfectly diatonic in the key of F major because that B flat crops up in the scale. Okay, and the F chord we're just going to leave as it is for now. If we were playing jazz or cocktail or something like that, we could enrich that chord. We can make an F major 7 or whatever, but for now we're just going to leave it as a straightforward F chord. Now listen to the kind of before and after there. Here's the kind of undressed up, the unadorned 2-5-1. G minor, C, F. And here it is with the sevenths, G minor 7, C7, F. Not a massive difference, but just a little bit richer, a little bit more complex sounding. Now that kind of extension there, just adding sevenths, is so straightforward that if you're working on someone else's song, you'll probably find that it's already baked into the chord progression. Yeah, when you get the chord progression, it will already have those sevenths in it. If you're working on your own song though, adding those sevenths, just enriching the 2-5-1 a little bit, is one of the first things you should try doing. Don't forget, when you're messing around with 2-5-1s like this, it's also really important to think about the chord shapes, the inversions, the voicings that you're using. So we can play our G minor 7, C7, F like that, but we can also do it like this, G minor 7, C7, F, or like this, G minor 7, C7, F, lots of different ways. Also think about the bass voicing a little bit, because the note you play in the bass has the biggest single effect of any note in the chord, okay? So straightforwardly we might do something like this. Okay, just playing the root of each chord in the bass, but you don't have to do that. You can create different effects with different bass notes. So G minor 7, C7 retaining the G in the bass, F. Okay, or G minor 7, C7, F. Okay, giving us a kind of incomplete sound down there because we haven't got the F right at the bottom of the chord there. So, suggesting we're going to move on to something else. As always, with all the stuff we're talking about here, don't just play around with the chords, play around with the inversions, take it to the piano keyboard and have a go at some of this stuff for yourself and listen to the effect that these different things have as you play. It's pretty easy to move beyond just using those 7th extensions in your 2-5-1s. In particular, you might find 9th extensions pretty useful. Let me show you how that might work in the key of C. So here we are with the scale of C again, and we know that our basic 2-5-1 in C is D minor, G, C. Now let's see what happens if we use a D minor 9th chord there. Okay, so D minor 9, there's the basic D minor 7. We create D minor 9 by adding an E. Now because that's a 5-note chord, typically we would spread it across 2 hands. It's awkward to play in one hand, and the most common way of doing that would be to play that kind of shape in the right hand, or something like it, with the root of the chord in the left. Okay, so D minor 9, and let's run that with the 2-5-1. 2, 5, 1. D minor 9, G7, C. Do you see what that D minor 9 is giving us there? It's giving us that E, which gives us a natural flow down the scale in terms of our top note, our melody note, okay, towards the C. So D minor 9, G7, C. We've got the E, D, C. There's something really important to notice there. You remember earlier we were talking about the similarities between the 2 chord and the 4 chord, about how they share notes and how they often share harmonic functions. Well, here you can really see that in action, because if you look at even at the D minor 7 chord, you can see it contains excuse me, it contains all the notes of the chord of F, just with a D added to give it that kind of minor tonality. Okay, if we look at D minor 9, then what we're doing in the right hand in effect is playing an F major 7 chord. Okay, F major with a 7th on top, a major 7th on top, and a D in the bass for D minor 9. Okay, these 2 chords are very, very closely linked to one another, and we can chop and change it and replace them with one another. So if we had D minor 9, G7, C, it's very easy to just play that as F major 7, G7, C. Okay, functionally what's happening there is exactly the same. It doesn't make any structural change to the music. We just get, each one just gives us a slightly different sound. So if we go for the 2-5-1, you know, we get a kind of slightly maybe kind of darker, maybe richer sound on the D minor 9, whereas if we want something brighter and more open, we could go for the 4-5-1. Okay, so functionally the same, just slightly different in musical terms. And if you're songwriting, if you're improvising, that's when you have to make a decision about the exact type of sound you want to make, okay, because those chords really are in many ways interchangeable. Your next option is to change some of the chords in your 2-5-1 completely. To use the technical term, that means substituting those chords, replacing them with other chords that maybe sound very different and maybe have very different names, but which have the same function, which do the same job in terms of the overall harmonic structure. Now, we've already done a bit of very basic chord substitution when we were swapping around our number 2 chord and our number 4 chord. Yeah, those chords are very easy to substitute for one another. But chord substitution can get a lot more complex and a lot more interesting than that, especially in styles like jazz. Yeah. Let's start off by looking at quite a straightforward substitution. We'll stay in the key of C for now. And let's start off as normal with our number 2 chord, D minor 7. But then instead of going to the number 5 chord, the G, I'm going to go to D minor 7 over G. I'm going to substitute that for the G, because it will also, just as effectively as the G, resolve us to the C. Okay, listen to that again. D minor 7 over G, C. Okay, so that D minor 7 over G has the same function as a regular G chord. It wants to take us back to the C. It does so with a slightly different character. It has a kind of a little bit more of a mellow sound, a bit more of a chilled out sound. It's not quite as neat and tidy and regimented as a regular G chord, okay, but it does the same job. So that gives us quite a nice substitution. And with that substitution, we can extend it, we can play around with it. So we can play D minor 9, F major 7 over G to C. We can change the voicings and inversions. D minor 7, F major 7 over G to C. Yeah, there's loads of different things we can do there. Okay, and we can begin to create sounds that are distinctive to the genre we're playing in. Now, you know, that's especially handy if you're playing jazz, yeah? So we could, if we wanted to play a jazzy or a cocktail type style, we could do something like D minor 9, G13, C6. Let me play that again. D minor 9, G13, which is what that is with some notes missing, C6. Or we could begin to play around chromatically, adding notes that aren't part of the diatonic scale. D minor 7, D minor 7 with a flat 5 over G to C6. Yeah, and once you start playing around chromatically like that, and that's really what you should do, play around, experiment, see what sounds you can make, then there's all sorts of stuff you can do with the basic 2-5-1. You can even go for the famous tritone substitution as part of a 2-5-1. D minor 7, D flat 7 over G, C. That's the tritone sub, which I've talked about elsewhere in the past. How about if you want to achieve a cleaner, kind of less jazzy sound than a 2-5-1? Well, something you can do there is use a sus4 chord, especially in the 5 slot of the 2-5-1. Now, we saw that in the Mozart example earlier, but let's have a look at how it might look in the key of C. Let's start on number 2 chord as normal, a D minor 7, and then go to a G sus4, okay, and then to a C. Okay, can you hear how that works? Let's just try it in a different inversion. Let's just try a straight D minor chord, G sus4 to C. Okay, quite an interesting sound there, quite clean, quite sparse. The G sus4 chord is just an ordinary G chord, but with the B taken out and a C added. So that C is 1, 2, 3, 4, a fourth above the root of the chord, so G sus4. Quite a really interesting, unstable sound. Now, one thing you'll find if you use a sus4 chord in that slot on the 5 chord, you'll find that the suspended note is the tonic of the key. It's C, so we're in the key of C major, the tonic is C. G sus4 has as its suspended fourth that tonic note. So you can do quite a bit of quite interesting stuff, and again retaining the tonic note at the top of the sequence. D minor 7, G sus4 to C. Okay, often you might come off the suspended notes down to the 3rd note of the 5 chord, the B in C major, and that gives you a leading tone up to the C. That's what Mozart did in the example we looked at earlier. Yeah, lots of cool stuff you can do there. So as you can probably see, your 2-5-1 and 4-5-1 sequences might look fairly straightforward, but they offer you lots of opportunity to add musical interest, to add variety, to add character to your songwriting and to your improvisation. Do remember though that picking cool extensions or substitutions is great, but you need to make sure they lock together in a musical way. You need to choose good voicings and inversions to play them in, okay? One good way to do that is to think always about your top line, to think about the shape that your highest notes are describing on the keyboard. Yeah, even if you're not playing a particular melody, think about that top line. Now, if you're playing a 2-5-1, then most of the time probably one jump in that top line is going to be fine. But if you've got 2 jumps, that's probably going to indicate that you've got some sort of problem. So let's say we choose these inversions, these voicings, D minor 7, G to C. Okay, we're moving stepwise, one note down the scale at a time, from the D minor 7 to the G, but we've got to jump down to the C. Okay, not such a big problem. But if we had a jump between each chord, and especially if they were big jumps, okay, that suggests that we maybe want to think again. You might want that as a musical effect, and if you're doing it deliberately, that's fine. But if you're having those big jumps, that they need to be part of your musical plan, as it were. If you're playing the chord inversions and getting big jumps in your top line without planning, that suggests you've got a problem with your what we call voice leading. Okay, voice leading is all about how we manage the flow of our melodic lines. Okay, and poor voice leading in that top line suggests that you are picking chord inversions which don't lock together well, aren't as musically logical as they could be, and don't sound quite as good as they could be. Okay, so a good general principle for playing chordal accompaniments is don't jump around too much, but I think it's particularly important because it's particularly noticeable in 2/5/1s and 4/5/1s. Okay, so that's about it for another tutorial. Hope you enjoyed it. As usual, if you have any questions or comments, just add them below. Don't forget to check out distrokid.com if you are producing or writing your own songs, because great opportunity for you there to get your stuff in all the major online stores. As usual, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow me on my various social media bits and pieces. Links are all in the description text below, and check out my book, How to Really Play the Piano, the Stuff Your Teacher Never Taught You, which, you know, if this stuff about chords and so on is kind of a bit new to you, kind of a bit confusing, it will explain the basics that you need to know, as long as you can read just a little bit of basic right and left hand piano music. Okay, there we go. Hope that was useful. I'll see you next time.